absolutely going to be in scope of the Consumer Duty. Whether you're a manufacturer or a distributor, you will be in scope. And the FCA is expecting you already to have implemented or put together your implementation plans and have finalised those. And it's given you a bit more time, though, to actually cross the T's and dot the I's. And I'll come on to that a little bit later on. But hopefully today's webinar will help you build a solid implementation plan which will stand up to the scrutiny and also hopefully help your business, which is not only, and I think the key thing about Consumer Duty is not just about the regulator's expectations, but there's actually a lot of value that comes out of this as well, and we'll be talking about that later on. Now, I suspect you've probably already watched a webinar, you've got the Consumer Duty DVD, you've probably even got the I Love Consumer Duty t-shirt. So what we're not going to do is we're not going to talk about Consumer Duty in terms of what the FCA are saying in terms of their policy statements and so on. What we're really going to focus on today is what this actually means to your business. What is the FCA expecting of you in your business? So what does it expect of you, and what does it mean for you and your business, and how are you going to tackle that within your implementation plan? So we're not going to, as I say, touch on the niceties of all the consultations and the policies and the very lengthy wording the FCA have given us. It's really about what it means to you. So we're going to try and be very practical and get to the detail as quickly as possible. As I said, don't worry if you can't attend the whole session. Just to introduce myself, my name is Nick Hunt. I'm a senior manager in the investment team here in Thistle. I'm joined by my colleagues, Lorraine Moat, Head of Payment Services, and Shaz Begum, Credit and Mortgage Manager at Thistle. And we're going to be talking through a number of aspects, and Shaz and Lorraine are going to be jumping in throughout the session, sure, interrupting me many times, hopefully, on some of the really important subjects that we want to talk to you about today. Okay, so let's crack on. So we're going to just, in terms of the overview on the next slide, we're going to just really focus on these subjects today. We're going to talk about what should your implementation plan achieve, what are the new rules, what are the implications of the rules for your business, what activities are in and out of scope for the Consumer Duty, what the FCA expects of you, and what does it not expect of you. How do you review your existing products and services? That's a really big one. We're often asked about that. And also, what are the must-haves in your implementation plan? We're then going to finish up with some next steps for you, some takeaways, hopefully, from today's session that you'll be able to use practically. And then we'll take some questions and answers, and we'll talk a little bit about how we're helping other clients as well presently on Consumer Duty. Okay, so let's move on. So what should your implementation plan achieve? Well, I think the first thing, obviously, we need to look at is what the FCA said around the implementation. So on the next slide, what we do is I'm just going to kind of outline to you what exactly the FCA was saying. So they were saying basically by the end of October, your firm should have agreed an implementation plan that's agreed with your board or a government body, and that should be prepared and that should be shared with the FCA, with your governing body, and you should also have that included in things like minutes, board papers, and so on. So it's not just about having a plan, but it's also ensures that it means that you need to have shared that as well, and also you should have shared information with your distributors, perhaps if you're a manufacturer, and you should have also considered if they're especially in terms of timing, the FCA said 3 months before the implementation deadline, you need to have those things in place. And the FCA said also that you should be engaging the FCA, especially if you're going to withdraw a service or a product as a result of the Consumer Duty. And you need to inform the FCA if you don't think that you're going to get the work done in time. So there's quite a lot to do here. I think this reminds me a little bit of the Tardis, and anyone who's watched any episode of the Doctor Who series will know that the Tardis is, seems relatively small from the outside, but huge on the inside. And so what the FCA has recognised is that this is a bit of a Tardis. So they've given time to firms to actually implement their plans a little bit more, or develop their plans a little bit more. And on the next slide, what we do is we outline what the FCA is actually saying is expecting you to do. So it's saying that you should have done you should at least by then have considered, right, making sure that we've actually made sure that the plans are not quite finished but are shared. We've worked out that the board actually has taken consideration of those things, and also that you provide assurance not only to the board but also that you're able to provide assurance to the regulator that you are going to meet those deadlines. So the deadline for July next year for open existing products, open for products and services, open for new business and renewal, and also for 2024 is going to be for products and services that are closed and no longer available to customers. So just moving on, we're going to talk about, as I said, we're going to talk about another area, which is to do with what are the implications for your business. And if we can just move to the next slide, please. So, as I said, as I touched on there, the FCA do expect you, and they have introduced a communication back in October saying that you need to have these plans readily developed, and ensure that not only that you've got those plans ready, but you've also fully scoped out what the implications are for your business. So if we go on to the next scope, we're going to talk. Next slide, please. We're going to talk about what are the implications for your business. Now,
sorry to interrupt you. Just before you go on, I think it might be quite helpful for us just to think about as part of that requirement around what the board needs to be aware of, is to talk maybe about some of the accountability expectations here, and just looking at it from a sort of SMCR perspective, and certainly coming from it from a sort of payment services perspective, where they're not yet subject to SMCR requirements. I think it's important to note that there's still an accountability expectation. I mean, good governance, appropriate organisational culture has always been a key focus area of the FCA, and that's very often been driven through that senior management accountability. So I think where consumer duty and SMCR both have those sort of shared objectives of setting those new standards of accountability through creating healthy cultures, I think it's important to note that even where your firm may not be subject to SMCR, that the FCA nonetheless expects firms to have that appropriate senior management oversight and accountability for the consumer duty, and just to make sure that their staff are therefore acting in accordance with their requirements. So I think it's important just to throw that in there. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, absolutely. And we're going to talk about SMCR as well a little later on when we talk about your implementation plan, what should be part of it, and what you include within it to cover off the SMCR piece, which is, as you say, Lorraine, is hugely important.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the implications of the consumer duty for your business. What does it actually mean for your business? Now, as I said before, I'm not going to talk about the individual rules. What I want to do here is to focus on what are the actual.
I'll send a thing to my colleague. Thanks.
Okay. And if you, by the way, if you are joining, if you wouldn't mind going on mute as well, that would be very helpful to us, for everyone's listening. Pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. So yes, so what are the implications? The first one around products and services. So, the rules are very clear on this. It does what it says on the tin. The products and services must be designed to meet the needs and characteristics and objectives of target groups of customers. And those of you, I'm sure, who'll be very familiar with the PROD requirements will know that this is pretty much a sort of copy and paste exercise. I think the important thing, though, is that what the FCA is really expecting you to do, and this goes across all of the requirements here in terms of consumer duty, is it's got to be evidential. You've got to not only say these are the ideal products and services, this is what these are the ones that we believe are the right things for the customer, and whether that be a manufacturer and designing a product or in terms of distributing a product, to sort of following that all the way through. But also the FCA is expecting you to have documented very clearly what are the positive and negative target markets, making sure that you've got the right distribution strategy and it's documented, and also monitoring and capturing evidence of this. And it is, as I said, very evidential. What evidence do you have that these products and services are going to the right types of customers, and they are right for those customers? Shaz, I mean, what's your thoughts on this? I mean, this is a big area for you, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So for the lending space, the language is a new thing. Just distributors and manufacturers is traditionally something language that's used in the investment and insurance space. So just applying that to the credit model, it's lenders being the manufacturers and brokers being distributors, whether that's credit or mortgage or other models. So what brokers really need to do here is get that target audience, target market information from lenders, and make sure they are also following what the product is designed for and what the audience is for. One of the key things for credit brokers and mortgage brokers is also making sure that you're not promoting unsuitable products. So that's one of the key regulatory thresholds. So in order to do that, you would have to ask questions to your target audience on whether on the types of products that they're looking for and what you are promoting to them to ensure that you are meeting their needs. And then this could be done through like simple questionnaires. If it's just say if it's a credit card you're promoting, just asking what type of credit card are you looking for, and then showing the appropriate products to them. So it's really about getting that target market audience information from lenders, and designing your promotion channels through that.
Okay, so there's a lot to do there. Okay, so that's already that's a big area in itself. As I said, consider the Tardis analogy earlier on. Price and value, that's another big one. Now, the FCA expects you to, when you consider you're dealing with retail customers, to ensure they receive full fair value. And I think the important thing about this is the FCA is not saying it's all about price. It's about the relationship between the price the customer pays, the retail customer pays, and also the benefit that they receive from it, whether that be a service or a product. And that's something that, again, is not just a question saying, well, that's what we charge, or that's what the product charges are. You've got to do some sort of assessment and be able to demonstrate that you have considered the price and, as I said, of the service delivered. And it may well be that you might want to think, well, can we offer this proposition in a slightly different way, perhaps in a cheaper way? However, it doesn't mean to say that it's all, as I said, that you can't charge what you need to charge. Certainly the FCA is saying, for example, they're not prohibiting differential pricing. They're not prohibiting any in terms of pricing, offering a cross subsidization even. And what they are saying, though, is that when you provide a product or service to a customer, you're transparent about the costs and charges associated with it, and that you can not only you're transparent and you're clear, but you're also able to justify those costs and charges to the customer. So that's what fair value is all about. I mean, Lorraine, again, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so it's a really good point to consider here, Nick. And as Nick has alluded to, it's really important to ensure that there is that reasonable relationship between the cost paid by the customer and the benefits that your firm's receiving in return. But I think there's something else we really need to think about. Another important element to this is to think about such costs that are not necessarily always financial. There could, in fact, be some non-monetary costs. Let's say, for example, the use of customer data, which in fact, as a business, you could be monetizing. So I think, when you're thinking about costs, just do not focus only on those financial costs. Think out the box and think a little bit wider in terms of how that can impact your business.
Shaz, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think this for the lending spaces really means thinking about the fees that you're charging. This could be arrangement fees, late payment fees, rates of interest, platform fees, and really justifying what those costs are about, breaking down what you're doing to charge those fees to your customers, and what service or benefit is being provided here to justify the cost. I think wider than that is also doing market analysis compared to your competitors, and where that your pricing sits within this, and how the USP of your products and what the value is compared to competitors as part of a wider evaluation of it. For brokers, it's going back to regulatory things that are already in existence. So looking at your commission structure, justifying this, making sure that it doesn't affect your impartiality, which is quite an important one. Preventing conflicts of interest. So obviously we all know, when you're broking products, the risk there is that products may be promoted where there's a higher commission being received. So it's really about being fair on why products are being promoted to customers, and if there is some sort of impartiality, if it can't be mitigated, then disclosing that at least.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Shaz. Wow, so it's getting bigger and bigger, this subject. So let's move on. Customer understanding. This kind of, if we go to the if we can go back one slide. So customer understanding. So this is in customer support. This is one of those things that, in terms of the customer understanding, people will say, well, of course, this is not new. And the FCA, whether we go right back to, pensions freedom and the introduction of pensions freedom, that the FCA, we're very focused on ensuring customers understand the products that they're investing in and the choices. What this does bring into focus, though, is it's not sufficient to say, yes, we think our customers do really understand our literature or our website. But it's about testing. It's about questioning and testing. So testing, and also recording those results and making improvements. So it's looking for some genuine activity. Whether you're a manufacturer or a distributor, you need to do that. And I think the other thing is, again, this might be a new area for you, somewhere that you're not very familiar with. Perhaps you haven't done a lot of this before. Have a look at the FCA's excellent guidance on this. It's in FG 22.5, and they just give some guidance in terms of different ways that you can do testing. And I counsel you to read that guidance and to potentially use some of the ideas in there. In terms of Chaz, again, from an understanding perspective, what's your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think for the lending space, again, it's just about making material conditions or limitations within the product and service should be clear to the target market, and where, as you already mentioned, doing that consumer understanding and testing of it. So things like your key terms shouldn't be buried in terms and conditions, and if you are referring to an FAQ, explaining why you're referring to the customer to these FAQs and the importance of them, not just saying, oh, this is important, read the FAQ, but really explaining, okay, this is important, this is why we are taking you off this page into another page. So it could be things like repayment start dates, late payment fees, or just material conditions and aspects of the product that the customer really ought to know. And also to remember that this isn't a one-off assessment. It should be done throughout the customer journey. So if you're seeing that people may have just ticked something off at the start and shown that they may have understood it just by saying ticking exercise, actually looking at the product life cycle and seeing if there were problems later on, like for instance they are paying late a high amount of late payment fees, and then looking at, okay, well, they ticked yes, so what's happened throughout this life cycle for this customer to get into this situation now. And then for brokers, just ensuring that the customer understands how you're being remunerated. This doesn't need to be a detailed breakdown of exactly what percentage commission you're receiving, but just information that there is remuneration involved. Sorry, that's me.
Great, thank you very much, Chaz. So customer support, another big outcome. As I said, I'm not going to dive into what the FCA say, but what does it mean? What does it mean to you? And I think the most important thing is, again, you'll say, well, we've been providing services to customers for a long time. We get very few complaints. We're very happy with those services. But what the FCA is saying is you kind of turn it on its head a little bit. So you're designing the service, that your service proposition has got to be good by design. In terms of providing a good outcome to good customer outcome, you've got to think about what good looks like. So from a customer's perspective, standing in their shoes, what does a good service look like? Not that this is the service we offer. So again, start with the end in mind. Start doing some research with customers. Ask them what sort of service they're expecting. And then think about what you need to do to fulfill that objective. So it's about tailoring it. And I think the other thing about it, and the FCA were very pains to talk about this, is that you've got to think about all of your customers. And of course, all customers, everyone's different, aren't they? And all customers, therefore, you need to think about, right, what services do we need to offer to different people? Now, you might say, well, I understand that, but we're an online, we offer all of our products and services online. We're an online provider. This is the way that we operate, and that's it. But what the FCA is saying is that actually you need to think about an exceptions process potentially for customers that are not necessarily able or wanting to deal with you online. So that might mean, having a non-standard interface, for example, with customers, so you can speak to them on the phone, or a chat service or something like that. So being prepared to be adaptable, and that's what the regulator's expecting. So that's again one of the 4 outcomes. So that's an important step. I mean, again, you know, Lorraine, how does that? What's your views on that?
Yeah, so I think unlike where I guess many firms have been used to previously thinking about this sort of average customer, with consumer duty, there is really no concept of the average customer with whom, you know, your products and services need to align. And so when you're considering your target market, you need to first of all think about the sector in which you're operating and consider the risks where the services you provide could perhaps highlight any particular vulnerabilities. So if I use an example from my payment services world, quite often, not all of the time, but quite often the users of certain payment services, particularly the apps, or I guess we could argue maybe younger, more tech-aware type individuals. And you could be fooled into thinking that, okay, there's no real, what's the vulnerability there? These people know what they're doing, but there is still likely to be a number of risks to consider with that cohort of customers. And mostly because they themselves may be completely naive to or just unaware of the risks that they may be putting themselves forward to. So I think it's therefore just ensuring that any vulnerabilities that may be related to your sector, to the service or product you're providing, can be identified at that product design stage. So those customers can then be fully understood in terms of their needs, their vulnerabilities or requirements, and then you would be able to build that in to the customer communications and service design, which I think is completely key here.
And testing it as well, I guess, as well.
Absolutely.
So testing that those things are really well, those propositions are working for those types of customers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think, you know, just to add on that testing element, so, you know, increasingly, obviously, we see a lot of models in the digital space trying to cut down on, you know, face-to-face communication or phone lines and things like that. So where, you know, a platform may be relying on digital communication as its sole or, you know, one of the few communication channels, I would just encourage firms to ensure that you have a strong BCP in place. So testing on, you know, the downtime of those communication channels, and ensuring that you have contingency measures in place should those communication channels go down. So yeah, just on that note, it's just about testing. Increasingly, also just specifically within the lending space, on the consumer support aspect, like some models I've seen, you know, when, you know, if there's like delinquency or late payments, you know, it really be asking whether it's fair to, you know, only communicate to a customer when they're experiencing financial difficulty. You know, would an email suffice? What happens? It's about thinking about, you know, okay, what happens if they don't have access to their emails, to their phone, and they're going through financial difficulty, and they just don't want to, or they don't want to look at those things. So it's about seeing what's appropriate for that customer in that scenario as well.
Brilliant. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Wow, it's getting bigger and bigger. Okay, so let's move on. Let's focus on now. We're going to touch on the cross-cutting rules as well. What are the implications for our business from the cross-cutting rules? So again, I'm sure you've got the T-shirt on this one, so I'm not going to focus on it in too much detail. But first of all, acting in good faith. What does it mean? What does acting in good faith really mean? Well, it means for a business, it means acting honestly, fairly, openly, consistently, meeting the reasonable expectations of your customers. It means ensuring that the decisions that you make within your business don't, obviously not intentionally, but potentially unintentionally, may conflict with good faith from a customer's perspective. These cross-cutting rules were introduced to help you to kind of ensure that this is really fully embedded in your business. So I think acting in good faith, yes, of course you do, no question. Everybody, you know, in our industry, of course we have to act in good faith, but it's kind of thinking consciously, are we making commercial decisions perhaps that we may, without realizing, perhaps having some negative implications. Also avoiding foreseeable harm to retail customers. Again, you're not expected to know everything. The FCA said, you know, you're not expected to foresee everything, but there are certain things that you could have known, or could reasonably have been expected to have known, that could have had an implication to the customer. So again, you're not responsible for all harms, but you should take reasonable steps. An interesting aspect to this is, which we're often asked about, is that if we've made a recommendation to a client, an investment client, we've given them all the risk warnings, we've told them that this is an illiquid product, but it is it's a high risk product, and nevertheless they still invest in it. And the FCA have said that things do go wrong. They don't expect good outcomes all the time. But what you should have done, which is demonstrating through recording the way in which you deal with those customers, that you have been transparent and you have provided good information to them, and they have made and certainly that that is the right decision, that they've understood the risks associated with it. If we can move on, I think we've just jumped to slide 6, so we're just going to move on to the next slide, if we can. So if we go on to the next slide, and the next slide, and the next slide, and the next slide. I think we're going in the wrong direction there. Sorry. So bear with us. We'll just get the slides moving in the right direction. Okay, and there you go. So which activities are in scope of the consumer duty? Again, what businesses, what activities are in scope? Let's just crack on with those. We'll go through them quite quickly. So you should know really whether you're in scope or not. So just to remind you, if you're involved in consumer credit, almost certainly you will be in scope. If you could be a manufacturer, you could be a distributor, you could be both. You need to think about the consumer duty as both of those, perform both of those roles. Again, deposit taker, almost certainly, well, you will be in scope of the consumer duty. If you're an insurance provider of insurance, so ICOP's rules standard, you'll be in scope of that. The exceptions then might be reinsurance or contracts of large insurance, corporate insurance, for example, that's out of scope. But for certainly retail customers, then you will be. Investments, again, you will be in scope. The exception to that is professional clients, whether that be a per se professional or an elected professional, they'll be out of scope. But retail customers, giving investment advice to retail customers, absolutely. Mortgages, under MCOBs, yep, you're in scope, no question about that. The exception will be unregulated buy-to-let contracts, for example, and commercial lending, of course, and that's out of scope. Payment service need payment providers, very much in scope. Discretionary investment managers, this is one that often people wonder, are we actually in scope or not? Well, I'm sure those of you on board who on today's session will say, well, we're absolutely clear on this under COPS 2.4, from an agent as client rules, we don't really, we have some regulatory responsibility, but we don't think we really have much responsibility here. But what the FCA has said here is that actually put that to one side. It's all about customer outcomes here. And if you're a discretionary fund manager, what you are doing, of course, is you're identifying the target market, you're designing your propositions, and you've got to think about assessing those propositions and what value those provide to those retail customers, and that will be throughout the whole of the retail chain. So, what support are you giving to all of the distributors of your discretionary services, whether that be for your own clients or for other, for clients of other firms? So, discretionary fund managers very much in scope of the discretionary of the consumer duty. And that equally means that if you're an IFA firm, perhaps that have a separate discretionary service, think about them separately, treat them separately, and consider them separately. They're going to have different things are needed for both of those. We could spend a whole webinar purely on looking at discretionary managers, so we're going to move on. Fund managers. Fund managers are in scope. You might say, well, we don't. We create a proposition which is, we manage funds. That's what we do. We don't have any real direct relationship with a retail customer. But what the FCA say is that you are still, nevertheless, still involved in the designing of those investment propositions, whether that be model portfolios, for example. So you are still involved in those. And if you're managing funds, you're still thinking about the design of those funds and what outcomes they should be providing. Financial advisors. Again, you'll be saying, well, this is old hat for us. We've been doing this for years, nothing new. But what the FCA is saying is that you need to think about what the consumer duty means for your design and delivery of your initial and your ongoing services. And that means thinking, right, do we need to change this? Do we need to adapt this? Do we need to change it according to the different types of customers we deal with? So it is very much back to the drawing board and thinking, let's start again. And remember, as I said earlier on, it's about design, getting it correct by design. So thinking about the outcome, thinking about what you want the customers to receive, what customer experience it should be, and then designing it. And then in terms of the whole distribution chain, the question is, and this is a common question we get asked, what is my responsibility? I sit in this distribution chain. We play one part, but there's lots of other players in this that deliver this ultimate product or the ultimate service to a customer. And what the FCA say is that there's two things. First of all, you need to think about the extent that you're involved in the distribution chain is the extent in which you have some material influence over the outcome of the customer. So it's about the materiality. How much influence do you actually have over the outcome of the customer? And also they're saying that your responsibility should be commensurate with that. And what they've done is they've kind of said, look, forget terms and conditions, forget contractual terms and contractual limitations in this. It's about the customer outcome. Put all the legality to one side. It's about the customer outcome. What role do you play? And this is a tremendous opportunity, of course, for distributors and manufacturers to work together to create fantastic propositions for customers and use that in the consumer duty and use the consumer duty to do that. New entrants as well. If you're entering the UK for the first time, or you're operating in the UK and you're dealing with retail customers, you will definitely be in scope. And as part of the authorization process, which we do a lot of, we deal with a lot of firms going through authorization and we help them do that. The FCA will certainly be asking you for your implementation plan. So you need to think about consumer duty as part of your proposition. So now is a great time to think about that. Okay, let's move on. And I would say before I do go on, I just wanted to be clear on who's out of scope. So if you're a wholesale provider, so if you're a derivatives trader, a bond trader in the wholesale markets, you're out of scope. I think that's important. If you're dealing with customers outside of the UK, you're out of scope. If you're dealing with unregulated in an unregulated space, you're out of scope. But as I said, all the other areas very much in scope. And remember, it's not just existing customers, it's prospective customers as well. So think about that. Okay, what does the FCA expect me to do, and what does it not expect me to do? What is the bottom line here for us? What do we actually need to do? So these are the key things that the FCA is saying. This is almost copy and paste from the policy. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you what I think this really means, or what we think this really means. So putting customers at the heart of your business and focusing on good, delivering good outcomes to customers. What that means basically is, as I said before, is making sure your decisions that you make do not have a negative impact on customers. And I think the other thing about this is that, that word about the heart of your business, this is not a compliance function. This is not a compliance requirement. This is of the board and the leaders of the business that need to bring this into the business and introduce it into the business. So remember, this is very much at board level. There is no requirement for you to have a board champion, although we tend to think it's a very good idea, especially since a lot of the data that needs to be gathered, or the research that needs to be gathered, needs to be centralized, and ideally with one person who has oversight of all that information. So ideally, it should be one person. In terms of authority, ideally somebody at board level as well, because they have the clout to be able to make things happen. Secondly, provide products and services that are designed to meet the needs of the customers, that they provide clear value, and they help customers to achieve good outcomes. What does it mean? Well, very simply, it means being very clear about the products and services that you offer, telling them about, being clear about the products that the types of clients they're aimed at, the pricing of the products, being transparent about that. Again, it's about documenting it, testing it, learning, and improving what you're doing as well. The third one there about communication, engaging customers in a way so you can communicate with customers so that they can make effective, timely, and properly informed decisions. This is quite an interesting departure from the FCA. I think many of you in the advisory world will say, well, you know, we've been giving personal recommendations to customers. We say, this is the right thing for you. The FCA are very much saying you need to put more power into the hands of the customers to be able to make their decisions. So it's outlining the pros and the cons of things, of certain choices, certain financial choices, and then helping them and guiding them through, helping them to make their own minds up. In terms of not exploiting behavioural biases, well, some of you may have heard about behavioural economics. The FCA are very, very focused on behavioural economics. I'd counsel you to have a look at the FCA have produced lots of very good papers on it, actually. Find out about that, because what the FCA is saying here is that there are some inherent behavioural biases that customers have. And it's not obviously what you're not doing, and don't think the FCA thinks you're doing this really, that you're being, you know, using those to your advantage, but being cognizant of those and thinking, right, the client, for example, we understand what anchoring is all about. So what we're going to do is we're going to help the customer to think and depart from that and try to explain other things. So, you know, think about those certainly. Okay. I'm going to move on now to what the FCA does not expect us to do. So the first thing is limitations of the consumer principle. The FCA is not imposing upon you an open-ended duty that goes beyond the scope of the activities of your firm. And it doesn't go beyond the scope of the abilities of your firm to determine and influence the customer outcomes or to protect customers from foreseeable harm. It's not expecting you to do that. And it's important that you recognise what is within your scope and what is in your gift to change and what isn't in your gift to change. But there again, also working with, whether it be working with a manufacturer or working with a distributor to help with that. A good example that we had recently is a manufacturer that we were dealing with of an investment product decided that they felt it would be appropriate only to offer their proposition through intermediaries, through financial intermediaries, because of the complexity of the product. And that's an example of where the firm has recognised that, you know, it can't take on full responsibility and it needs to have another sort of helping hand. And it also demonstrates that they consider those outcomes as well from a customer outcome perspective. So a very positive example. The other thing is you're not expected to assume fiduciary duty exists. You know, you don't have to introduce services where it doesn't exist. You know, you don't have to do that. The FCA is not expecting you to do that. And also in terms of products and services, where there are weaknesses, you're not expected to put right those products and services. They're not your responsibility, but you are responsible to highlight any deficiencies, perhaps to a manufacturer, or perhaps even to a distributor, if you realise that your proposition, your product is actually ending up with the wrong type of customer. So again, as I said, the FCA is not expecting you to put anything right there. I mean, anyone, Lorraine, have you got any views on that you'd like to add to that?
No, I think, to be honest, what you've said is very clear. Certainly there's a lot for firms to think about here, Nick, but yeah, I don't have anything to add to what you've already said, but clearly that's quite an important area for firms to consider, for sure.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you. And let's move on then to talk about a little bit about how do we review our existing and old products and services. This is a common one that comes up from time to time. What do we need to do? What do we actually need to do in terms of our product? So there's certain things. Remember, there's those two deadlines. There's the July next year deadline and the deadline 2024 as well. So for next year, it's about ensuring that all your products and services available to existing customers or new customers, either as a new product or as a renewal, those have got to be reviewed and amended, and where changes taking place, that those two take place by that deadline. And for 24 will be for existing products and services that are for customers. So in terms of what you need to do now is you certainly need to think about what do we need to change. We need to do some research. We need to work out what those products and services are doing, whether they are being delivered to the right type of customer, are they achieving what they're supposed to achieve, and also identify perhaps some designs or products that we think actually, that's not the right thing for customers. It might frustrate the customer. It might not allow the customer to do what they want it to do. It might potentially breach those cross-cutting rules. So there's things that need to happen for those products and services. So you need to take action on those things. But of course you need to do some research first. So do the research, come to conclusions, make some decisions. And if there are significant changes, and which we shall talk about in a moment, you need to let the regulator know, and you also need to let a distributor know as well if you're going to make changes that will impact the distributor. In terms of changes for the future, again, same thing again, for products that are available to existing customers but are no longer available to new customers, you need to think about what do we need to change. And it doesn't mean to say that you need to re-underwrite those clients, for example. It doesn't mean to say that you have to start from the beginning and re-advise those clients, although you may wish to. It does mean, though, that you need to think, right, even for those customers that have got those products, they're not products that are currently available. We need to think about whether those existing products and services are going to provide good customer outcomes. If they're not, we're going to have to think about offering them an alternative product or an alternative service. Okay, let's move on.
Just before you do, sorry to interrupt you
Yes,
there, Nick. I think I just want to speak here a little bit to sort of innovation and those firms out there that have perhaps a more dynamic business model. And I'm going to sort of pull on my experiences here dealing with payment services firms and that operate in that sector, because I think these are quite often the types of firms that are characterized by pretty healthy innovation, if I'm honest. Where, for example, there's often sort of many rounds of testing, and as a result, that sort of final product could end up being sort of a million miles away from that product that was originally envisaged. So, maybe you're developing an app that's initially aimed for one particular set of customers over here with particular needs. But by the time you shape and change it through all those that iterative process, it ultimately could end up being more fitting for a completely different target market with completely different needs and characteristics. So, but this can cut across any firm. So I think whatever your firm type is, you need to ensure that when you're looking at your product governance frameworks, if you're a dynamic business, as most firms are, then you need to make sure that your governance framework is equally as dynamic, just to make sure that your products and services are adapting in the right way. So I think it's important to mention that.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. And thank you for interrupting me, because that was such an important point that firms need to recognise. Okay, let's move on to what are the must-haves in your implementation plan? What are the sort of gold standard almost? Again, the FCA gave some guidance on this, but this is what we think at Thistle it needs to kind of include within your plan. So the first thing is you need to have a policy. Why do you need a policy? Well, the policy are the rules in which the rest of the industry, the rest of the business follows. It will outline the standards that you expect, the procedures that you follow within the business, and the actions that you take in terms of when you see negative outcomes. So definitely put in place a consumer duty policy. If you haven't got one, we've got one as a template which you can use perhaps as a starting point, but it's very much your policy. It's not, it's got to be around you and your business and what you offer. Also identify that, draft that policy to ensure staff really understand it. And that's the other thing. This has got to be something that everybody understands within your business. It's not just for the board, but everybody understands that what they're, the end goal, as it were. Consider the scope of the duty across your business. So identify your operations which are in scope. Think about the potential touch points that you have throughout your business with retail customers. Think about what needs to be in scope. So again, going back to the Tardis analogy, suddenly you realise, actually, there's quite a long list of things here we need to review and test as well. Also, consider your compliance monitoring arrangements. I mean, in terms of compliance monitoring, this is a big subject. Lorraine, what's your views on compliance monitoring as far as the duty is concerned?
Yeah, so I think this kind of goes back to my previous comment around good governance, effective governance, and I think monitoring and oversight, obviously, of your operations falls part and parcel to that effective governance piece. I think in particular, the areas that firms will need to monitor mostly is going to be around sort of consumer experiences. But it can't just stop there. Like, it's been a good experience, it's been a bad experience, of course. It's then about investigating the root cause of that outcome if it's been a poor experience, and being able to evidence and explain how you've kind of been able to, I guess, evidence that it's been a good outcome or a poor outcome by looking at that end-to-end customer journey. But it actually goes a little bit beyond testing itself. And I would also encourage firms to sort of look at their testing capabilities. And I think that there's a bit of a bigger picture here, because I think we also get very focused on the rules. But I've seen examples where we're currently helping firms through this, where they look and they say, well, we've complied with that rule, that's great. But actually, when you look at the outcome despite that has been a poor outcome. So I think you can't just kind of keep to a tick box type approach. I think as well, it's important, again, just to talk about your business model and your strategy. I think it's really important when you're building that monitoring and that oversight to think about the future strategy of your business, the future of your business model, to make sure that not only are you consistent with the expectations of the consumer duty as it stands now, but also going forward into the future to make sure that you can remain compliant.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much, Lorraine. And in terms of other things, again, within your implementation plan, we certainly suggest that compliance training modules is a good way to make sure people understand. We offer within our services training modules. So again, if we can help with that, let us know. Senior managers need to take responsibility. Again, you might think about some specific training for senior managers. The COCON training definitely need to reflect the new requirements placed on senior managers. In terms of staff communications, communicate to the wider population within your business, and also other services that provide ancillary services perhaps to you as well. Tell them what you're doing, and that you're moving into this sort of more ensuring that you're fully embedding consumer duty, and that you're perhaps expecting them to do so as well. In terms of management information, be clear on exactly what management information you're going to capture to measure the right things. I know it sounds obvious, but right things, and that you're going to do this routinely. So that's really important. From a sort of, Lorraine, culture, strategy perspective, anything else to add to that?
Yeah, all I would say really, if I could, is just around or just really to make the point that I guess the consumer duty marks quite a major shift in the way I believe the FCA expects firms to protect its customers from harm. And if I could just pull it round to the payment services sector, I think the fact that payment services firms are being sort of held to the same high standards as other retail financial services sectors, it just kind of really reflects how the sector has grown in importance, which is a great thing. But it also sort of shows you just that increase in complexity and the risk that goes along with that in terms of the different types of payment products. So I think firms will really need to look at building their conduct risk capability significantly to allow them to sort of manage their obligations under the consumer duty, and also think again just how, going back to that strategy point, how strategy and culture is going to help you deliver to that, whilst of course not forgetting, importantly, allowing you to continue to innovate and challenge in the market in which you operate.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, let's get on now to next steps. and what are the things that we think you should be thinking about if you haven't already. So first of all, make sure that everyone knows about consumer duty within your business, especially senior managers. Make sure they understand the responsibility there. They are responsible for delivering good outcomes. List all the parts of your business that are in scope, and that have an influence over retail customers. Make sure those are very clearly documented. Record and communicate with the FCA as well. If you feel that potentially there's issues that you can't manage within the time frame, make sure you let the FCA know. But certainly be prepared to be asked questions and share documentation, share board minutes and that sort of thing. Be prepared to answer questions from the FCA. So make sure your senior managers is again ready to answer those questions. Review your products and services. Again, customer testing, really important. Making sure you're testing all of those 4 outcomes across all your products and services. Then finish off with your implementation plan. The FCA have given you a bit more time to do that. So make sure you finish it off. Make sure your plan is smart. I know it sounds mnemonic, I'm sure you're familiar with. Make sure your plan is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and timed. So make sure you've got your plan now down and aligned to that. And also, we suggest engage clients and let them know what's happening. I don't see this as a negative thing at all. I think the way that Thistle approaches this is that this is a positive thing. It's a way in which you can demonstrate that you're looking to improve your service to your customers, and that you see this as an opportunity to improve and improve and improve. And that can't be a bad thing. And I think customers, especially now in all this sort of, with a tremendous amount of negative news, it's nice to hear some really positive things about how you're seeing your relationship with them really, really so important that you want to provide a better service and better products. So just moving on to sort of final thoughts there from Lorraine and Shaz. Shaz, final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I mean, from a lending space, the key themes this year, what we're seeing from the FCA in applications and ongoing compliance is the updates that we have seen from the FCA on the cost of living, forbearance, debt management. So it's really about thinking about the consumer duty outcomes and in relation to those key themes in the lending space. So, really showing forbearance to borrowers when they're experiencing financial difficulty, and also before they even get to that stage of financial difficulty, using open banking to look for pre-delinquency monitoring and things like that. So really supporting customers experiencing that financial difficulty in this current climate, and we've seen the FCA really be hot on it on that topic this year.
Thanks, Shaz. And Lorraine? Do you have any final thoughts there, Lorraine?
I think just really reiterating what I just said a few seconds ago. I think for me, it's about be prepared, get involved early, but pay close attention to governance, strategy, and importantly, culture. I think with anything, I think in the world of FCA, if you've got a good or the right culture in place and good governance, I think it takes you a long way.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. So I hope you found this presentation useful. I'm just going to touch on some of the things that we're doing. If we can go to the next slide, actually, what we're doing with our existing clients, things that clients are coming to us for help with. So we're facilitating workshops, we're providing project management for some of the big changes, and we're dealing with a whole range of types of clients, whether that be a lender, a payment provider, an investment company, a fund manager, DFM, intermediary, wealth manager. We're kind of dealing with all firms across the financial services piece there. So also providing training, was helping with designing communications, providing some feedback and guidance on their own plans as well. They're coming to us and not saying, what should you think of this? So we're giving you some honest and hopefully impartial feedback as well. And we're also helping with things like we've got a procedure, consumer duty procedure, which is really designed for business as usual. So once you've implemented your plan, it's about making sure that you continue to keep consumer duty running. And this is your procedure. So your ongoing month by month, week by week, month by month, year by year procedure. We have a policy, which I mentioned earlier on, and we do have an implementation plan templates as well. Some people have asked for that, and we can give that. But again, I think the main thing here is we're here to help. We're here to give you feedback. This is your plan. This is your consumer duty. It's what you do with it that's important, not what we think. But we can give you some, as I said, hopefully some impartial guidance. So it comes to the end of today's webinar. I must congratulate you having followed us so far, especially since I know football is just about to kick off, literally. But we have a bit more time to answer questions. So I'm just going to have a quick look to see what questions have come through. So let me have a quick look. Yeah. So, right, we've got one question there for Lorraine. So it says, we are a payment service provider, but we do not provide services directly to consumers. So which one, which part of the consumer duty applies to me?
Okay, very good question. I think there's a lot of payment services firms actually have asked us that question directly. It's very clear to me that in the final rules, the new consumer duty, it extends the provision of payment services and issuing e-money, whether you're actually doing that directly to a retail customer or providing services as part of that distribution chain, which is something we've touched on much earlier in this presentation. Where that actually involves an end retail customer. So that, for example, could include a firm that provides maybe merchant acquiring services or an e-money issuer that uses a distributor or an agent to distribute their product. I guess the key question to ask yourself is this: do you have a material influence over any retail customer that may be at the end of that chain? And the answer to that is yes, then you're in scope of this for sure. Where, like just using the merchant acquiring example again, you may have direct retail customers if, for example, you sell your services, maybe say to charities, micro enterprises, who fall within that definition of retail customers as well. So retail customer, you've got to think about the actual definition of what that means. But you'll also need to think about your indirect retail customers, such as the individuals at the end of the chain that might be purchasing the goods as part of that sort of retail chain process. So where your business touches a retail customer, I would suggest that you're definitely going to be in scope, and all of the above applies to you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Lorraine. And
No
Shaz,
problem.
did you have a question? I think there's a question there for you.
Yeah, I had one come through earlier, and it's just about peer-to-peer platforms and the extent of the scope of the duty applying to them. So just with regards to peer-to-peer lending platforms, it really just depends, who's the lender, who's the borrower, what kind of amounts are they lending, and what's the reason. So for a lender, if it's obviously an institutional lender, outskirts. If it's a retail lender, yes, they're going to be in scope. You need to apply the outcomes and the cross-budgeting rules to them. Borrower, again, is it a sole trader, a partnership? Yes, but then if it's amounts above 25k and it's for business, then outscope. So it's really about thinking about who the borrower and lender is in this scenario, whether it would be ordinarily regulated, and if so, then you can kind of apply that general principle of yes, the scope of the duty is going to apply, and then where it's not going to be regulated, you can consider it. But it really does require case-by-case analysis on your products and services. Even if you do have so just say like a peer-to-peer platform where your retail lender is a customer and your borrower may be a business, as good practice, I would say it's as best practice, apply the principles anyway. You're never going to go wrong without when you apply the principles and as a best practice approach anyway.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Shaz. And Lorraine, listen, unfortunately, time is against us, so unfortunately you won't be able to answer any more questions. However, we have captured all of your questions and we will be answering those on our website. We'll be putting the questions and answers on our website together with the recording very, very soon. So watch out for that. We should be with you in about a week's time. I just wanted to kind of just take us, and say thank you for watching. We understand this is a challenging time for you. Please reach out to us for some guidance in any way we can help. We'd love to. Also, just to say, if we go on, in terms of us, if you haven't dealt with us before, we have different parts of our business. We have the Thistle Group. We are a Thistle Group of companies now, which includes Thistle Initiatives. which is a compliance consultancy providing a regulated business support to any firm, any investment firm, and also payment provider and lender stroke brokers as well. So we deal with the whole financial services marketplace, and we also have absolute cover as well, which is part of the Thistle Group, a specialist insurance brokerage dedicated to helping customers operating in the financial services sector. And we cover professional indemnity insurance as well. We provide guidance around cyber and data security, things around directors and officers insurance as well. So please contact us as well on the next screen. You can Google us, obviously, Thistle Initiatives, or you can email us at info@thistleinitiatives.co.uk, or give us a ring on that number. But I think you'll find us in due course. So listen, thank you very much for watching. We wish you the best of luck with your implementation. We look forward to speaking to you again very soon, and best of luck again, as I said.